Welcome to Season 2, Episode 5 of the Pursuit Rooted podcast. First episode this month, we talked about actually having a vision. Who do you want to become? Mm-hmm. Second episode, we talked about persistence. Yep. Like, okay, we're wanting to move forward and we hit adversity. And it's like, this one we're going to talk about being intentional, making every move count. So sometimes when we hit adversity, are we making the right moves? Are we moving in the right path? Are we making the right steps here? So, good intentions aren't enough. So let's talk about that real quick before we get into being intentional. Mm-hmm. Good intentions aren't enough. The quote that we've heard, I think everybody's heard this quote: "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." Mm-hmm. Even John Wesley used that in one of his sermons with a lot more King James fluff in it, probably. But good intentions without action just create frustration. Or in the case of this quote, it actually leads you into, I think what the intention here is that it leads you into experiencing a hellish life. Like, you have good intentions, but you never act on them. You know there's noble things you should do, but you don't. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it creates this, the sense of hell in your life. Then there's also the more literal, you intended to follow Christ, you intended to know Him, but you never actually did. And
I think it goes back to, that makes you, if you intend to do something, but then you keep failing to do it, then you have this constant mindset of, I'm a failure, because I can't.
Now, what identity are you painting for yourself? What's your vision? Because you're looking out and you're saying, I'm a failure, so everything you do is actually going to move you in that direction. Like, that'll happen. What we don't see is that making progress in the right direction, it requires adversity to bring that transformation, which we talked about last time. It takes that persistence. Mm-hmm. But you can just go with the flow. Yeah. It's like water runs downhill it takes the path of least resistance. So whenever I turn, so to speak, with the stream, and I begin to look and say, well, I keep failing at this. I keep hitting this adversity. I don't realize that's what's happening, but I'm just a failure. And it's like, my life begins to quickly flow that direction, and I feel like everything in my life begins to flow that way. Everything I do begins to flow that direction. It reinforces that. Now it becomes a self-propelling death cycle. I don't know what you want to call it, but if I just have good intentions and I never actually do anything, I never put any motivation behind them, then I'm just going to be frustrated. I'm never going to get to that place. So I have to have good intentions, but I have to have action with it, like intentional actions. Mm-hmm. So what we need instead are intentional actions that lead us to that person that we want to become. That person, I want to, in this sense, we're talking about discipleship, but this can apply to really anything. Like, I am a disciple of Christ, and what I want to do is for my life to move in the direction of being a disciple of Christ, the lifestyle of a disciple of Christ. So that's going to take intentional action. It's going to take persistence. Mm-hmm. I'm going to hit adversity, and adversity is going to cause me to look at this and say, okay, am I making the right moves? Am I taking the right steps? Okay, I'm pretty sure I am here. Oh, this is just that transformative process that's happening. Mm-hmm. But because I'm being made into that person. But, oh, hold on. I don't know. Maybe this actually isn't how I should go about this. Maybe the adversity I'm experiencing here isn't related to that transformative process. Maybe I'm making the wrong moves here, the wrong steps. So I have to have intentional actions. I can have frivolous actions. I can just kind of do whatever and be carried along. Mm-hmm. But if I'm intentional, I intend to work out a certain amount of time every single day. Mm-hmm. If I don't choose to do that, if I don't set the day up so that I can make that happen, then what happens is that the day just kind of carries me along, and I never actually accomplish that thing. That's just something I was thinking about, because that's what I intend to do. I intend to do that, and sometimes it doesn't. And I look at that and I say, well, why didn't it happen today? And I didn't set things up right. I didn't make the right move, so to speak. So how can I be more intentional about ensuring that I do that? Mm-hmm. What were you going to say? I thought you were about to say something.
I was just thinking, like, just the busyness of life in general. If you're not intentional, there's so many things, so many relationships or habits or anything. anything. I mean, you could go down every avenue of life. Like if it's important to you, then you have to be intentional to make it happen. And if
Yeah.
you don't, then it's not going to happen.
If you were on the worship team and you're saying, I want to do this to the best of my ability. I want to steward the gifts, the grace that I see that God has put on my life. Then, or you can say that I am an intentional worshiper who does everything with excellence and is consistently growing in the grace God gave me. Hey, that's who you're saying you are. But then the actions you take don't actually line up with that. And when adversity hits, you back off. Well, now we're never moving forward to being that person. So we have to persist whenever we begin to experience adversity, but we have to make the right moves. We have to make the intentional steps. Jesus' life was filled with very intentional moments. Think about the upper room discourse. He intentionally revealed himself to his disciples as a servant before he was betrayed, knowing he was going to be betrayed by the one of them that was in the room. Yeah. And before he was crowned King of Glory, knowing he was about to be crucified. He said, I'm going to be extremely intentional to show you what my heart looks like. Yep. And he laid his life down in front of them, so to speak, and served them before all this other stuff happened. Like, that was a very intentional act.
I'm going to show you how to lead.
Yes, yes. You, was it Bill Johnson says, you serve with the heart of a king, but you lead with the heart of a servant. So Jesus displayed to us that it wasn't enough to want to do something, to know to do something, or to even think about doing something, but rather we must put ourselves in motion and live it out. He wanted to show that humility and laying your life down, humbling yourself, like and serving one another, putting your brother before yourself and loving one another. Like that is what he wanted to show them in that moment, and that was the intentional way at which he did it. I think that's awesome. He lived it out in front of them. So, are your intentional actions taking you where you want to go? We talked about it's not just good intentions. It's about having intentional actions. About I'm doing this thing for a very specific reason. But is that taking me where I actually want to go? So we've decided we want to be intentional with our lives. Are we taking steps in the right direction? How do we know? How do we know that we're doing that? Do you want to read the scripture for this one here? Or Jesus talks about the cost of discipleship and lays out intentions?
Yeah, Luke 14:25-33 says, large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and you are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able, with 10,000 men, to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation, while the other is still a long way off, and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples.
So, and I want to point out some specific things in there. He said, come to me and does not hate, does not carry the cross and follow me, sets out to build a tower, estimate the cost, go to war, consider whether he's able, send a delegation, give up everything. These were very intentional actions. And in this example of all these different scenarios, and his examples show us that being a disciple of him is an intentional thing. That's what this is about. You know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote the book Cost of Discipleship. It's fantastic. It can be a little difficult to get through, but it's a good book. It's intentional. I'm laying my life down. Like we talked before, I'm giving up my right to choose. I'm being intentional about this. This is what's required for me to truly not just say I am a disciple, but live it out.
And I think I think Christ really makes plain in this text right here to say that being intentional, you first must make a plan. being intentional, you first must make a plan, because he's saying all these things like you wouldn't build a tower until you estimate the cost. You wouldn't go to war until you sat down and did these things to see if you could actually win. Like he's saying, in order to be intentional, we must lay a plan.
Yeah. What do you be intentional about?
Yeah, because I mean, I feel like there's so many people, like we talked about in one of the previous ones, about they cast a vision for the year, but it's such a lofty goal that it's unattainable, because they don't sit down and make a plan in like increments, or say, okay, well, I need, a metric system to measure, but I feel like he clearly says in this scripture, like, to be intentional, you have to lay out a plan in order for it to happen. You can't just say, okay, well, I'm going to be intentional. Mm-hmm. I think about with our lives and how busy it can sometimes be. Like, we had to put things in place to be intentional, to make time for things. Like, we started doing a shared family calendar a couple of years ago, and we're really intentional about, okay, this on this day and this on this day, and we got to put this in once a month to make sure, we're working on our relationship, or like with the kids, or whatever it may be. But like, that takes planning, that takes scheduling, that takes, to be intentional, it's not just something you do in a whim. Would you agree or no?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And so like something for me is that I want to be someone who is like cultivating relationships and is giving time to help pour into others. It's more specific than that, but let's just say it's that. And I had to look at that and say, well, if I'm going to do that, I have to carve out time for that. Mm-hmm. It's not that I have to like carve that time out. I want to carve that time out. Like, I want to do that.
But you don't want to neglect your marriage or your kids in the
process. So I'm saying there's all these different things. Like, I want to represent God well. Mm-hmm. And this is the way I'm going to represent him well, by being a loving, caring, intentional husband, by being a good father, by being someone who cultivates relationships, by being a disciple maker. Like, these are all part of the plan of who I am becoming. And then I look at that and I say, well, how am I going to make that like reality? Yes. So a while back, I was meeting with someone, and they told me, they said, when you used to message me and say, like, or I used to message you, or you used to message me, and we talk about getting together, and you'd say, okay, we can get together on the 23rd at 6 p.m. He was like, I always thought, man, I always just felt like a business scheduler. He said, but after we had kids, like, I understood why. And he said, and I realized that you were being intentional about it. And we've had this conversation a couple of times, and one time he brought it up. He said, I realize you do that because you care. You want to give me that undivided attention. And I said, yes, that's exactly why, because it's meaningful to me. So I'm doing this, and I'm like, I'm not going to have my phone out. I'm going to give that person my full attention. I'm going to give them the time that I said I was going to give them. But if I don't do that, if I don't prioritize it, it doesn't become a thing. Mm-hmm. If I don't prioritize spending time with a friend, then the friendship doesn't grow. Yeah. If I don't, I love jiu-jitsu. If I don't prioritize time to go to the gym to train, I'm never going to truly embody, the life of a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Like, that's something I think I enjoy doing. I want to keep doing. So then, well, why am I doing this? What am I really aiming at here? Mm-hmm. Because just to say, well, I'm doing it as a hobby. Well, so you're just kind of fluttering in and fluttering out? Or what's your goal here? What's your purpose behind this? You get specific in where you're aiming for, where you're going, but then you have to put those intentional actions in place so that you start moving that direction. Mm-hmm. And I think Jesus pointed that out in here when he was talking about the cost of discipleship, that you don't do these things without considering them first. Mm-hmm. You put the plan together, but then once you make this decision, you act on it. You go, you move forward. So in the beginning, being intentional with our actions, I kind of mentioned this before at the beginning of this about the way water flows. A salmon swims upstream, like they go against the flow. They go against what's comfortable, and that's for a specific purpose. Like, that's what happens whenever we say, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah. I'm going this direction. This is who I am. The moment that I say this is who I am, I've put I've kind of like put a target on myself, because every day that goes by that my actions aren't lining up with that is another day that I'm moving in inconsistency. Mm-hmm. And I either change. This has to go away. And I have to quit lying to myself, or I have to get my life in line with it and start moving forward in that direction. Experience the adversity, experience the transformation, be persistent, be consistent, and get going that direction.
And I think that's why just discipleship in general, discipleship in the church in general is so important, because when you decide that you're yes, this is what I'm doing to be a disciple of Christ, and I have this plan, I'm going to be intentional. Like you said, if things aren't going according to plan, there's inconsistency coming up, you have someone that is helping disciple you, that's holding you accountable and saying, hey, this is the plan we laid out, and I see you veering off of that, so how can we get back on that? Because without that accountability, a lot of times they're just going to be fluttering intentions.
Yeah. And they're just going out in every direction, and we're not going anywhere in life. We're just kind of fluttering around, and that's not helping anybody, and it's not good stewardship of your life. So not only must we have intentional actions, but they must be the right ones. So I'm being super intentional, but I'm being super intentional the wrong way. Well, that's going to be a problem. I have to be intentional in spending my time in the right way, and that will produce the right result over time. Yeah. So the example I use here, going back to jiu-jitsu, is if I want to compete in jiu-jitsu, I must intentionally study and practice it. I have to study it, and then I have to do it. These are the things that a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner does. They do these things, and I need to be that if I'm going to compete in this sport. But if I went into the gym and I just took kickboxing classes, that has nothing to do with jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu is grappling. It's on the ground. We're up around the ground. We're wrestling. I would never be able to honestly say I'm a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner, because my whole life would demonstrate that I'm not. Well, what are you doing to become that person? You're making intentional moves. You're showing up to the classes, but you're showing up to all the wrong classes. Like, what do you do? So now you're out of sync. You're completely out of sync. So it's not enough just to make intentional actions. You have to make the right ones. Like, I'm gonna be really intentional about being a disciple. Okay, so I think this would be an example of it. Okay, I'm only going to watch 4 R-rated movies a month as my step to be intentional as a disciple. And I would say that's very intentional. So you're setting a plan. You're only going to watch this many a month. But is that the right action? Okay. And I use that because nowadays, I mean, if you watch an R-rated movie, it's probably going to have a whole bunch of garbage in it. I'm not against movies. I love movies, people. But I love good movies. So I would say, so is that actually moving you in the right direction? Well, it's down from the 12 I watch. Well, that's a different thing. Now we're talking about not stewarding our time wisely. Now we're talking about not prioritizing our life. Now we're talking about just being gluttonous on entertainment. Like, now you've opened up a whole nother can of worms.
When we were in that meeting the other day, and you said something about binge watching Netflix and about time management, and I felt like the whole room just deflated when you said, if you're spending your time binge watching Netflix, it's just like, because I mean that's what a lot of people do. Common, yeah.
It's like, that's not how you steward your life wisely. So it's not enough to be intentional. I have to be intentional in the right way. So if I say that I'm following Jesus, but I intentionally walk down a path that he's not walking down, sin, habits that are not consistent with the kingdom, well, then I can say all day long I'm following him, but the problem is he's not going the way I'm going. So my vision is I'm following Jesus, I'm following Jesus, I'm following Jesus. And it's like, but the things I'm doing, the habits I'm creating, the path I'm walking on, that's not where he's at. He's over here. I was talking to somebody one time, and I cannot remember where I heard this, but it was great. I loved it. They said, I want to follow Jesus, but I want to continue to sleep with my girlfriend, whatever it may be, have sex outside of marriage. It's like, okay, you can do that all day long. Problem is, Jesus ain't walking down that path. I don't know what to tell you, sport. That's not the way he's going. My vision is I'm following Jesus. I'm a disciple of Christ. My actions are not taking me that direction. Therefore, I'm not on the path with Jesus.
Mm-hmm. I think it just popped in my head, but I think about it this way, like, and you know, because you've been married to me long enough, I have a terrible sense of direction.
Oh, yeah.
It's
bad.
Oh,
man.
I don't care if we're walking.
You have no idea.
I don't care if we're walking. I don't care if we're driving. I don't know east from west. Don't ask me. It ain't happening.
Cardinal directions, no.
Nope. I think so confidently I'm going in the right direction when I am not. And Joe knows not to even.
I always remember Puerto Rico.
Why?
2014.
Why do you let me have the map? You know.
Can I just tell that story real quick?
In a minute. Anywho, I'm thinking, like, for me personally, I have no sense of direction. A majority of people don't, especially women. I'm just going to stereotype us here. I'm sorry. But.
You're doing one for the cause, babe.
I know, right? So I'm just thinking, like, okay, I'm going to, Charlotte, okay? In my mind, I'm thinking, as I'm driving, I'm going to Charlotte. Charlotte. And the whole time, I'm like, yes, I'm going to Charlotte. But then I never pick up the phone and look at the map to see if I'm actually going in the right direction to Charlotte.
You're being very intentional about wanting to go to Charlotte.
I'm very intentional about driving towards the way that I think is towards Charlotte. And then I realize I am going in the wrong direction. And I feel like that's how it is, like you were talking about, like we can think we're on the right path and think we're doing the right things, but our sense of direction is way off because we're not being guided by the actual thing that needs to guide us in the right direction. Go ahead and tell your story about Puerto Rico.
No, I'll tell it in just a second, but like I think that's why we need the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Because He keeps that, He adjusts that.
He's Siri, rerouting.
Yeah. Hey, okay. Wow, you took a wrong turn here, but it's okay. We're gonna get you back on the path. Yeah. Yeah. But that's also why we need community. We need to have people around us that we're saying, going back to the first time we talked about this is the person who I want to become. Okay, great. I'm trying to take the steps to go in that direction, but I'm hitting the adversity. Okay, well, what kind of adversity are we talking about here? Yeah. Well, okay, you're not actually being intentional about this. This is not adversity at all in the sense of you're trying to move forward. There's inconsistency, or you're actually going the wrong way.
Yeah. Are you blatantly sinning here, or are you just a procrastinator? Like, let's figure this out.
Yeah,
here.
Let's be intentional about the way we're moving, but let's be intentional about moving in the right direction so that we can become that person. So our Puerto Rico story here. Okay, now that I said it, we got to tell it.
Go for it.
We were near Arecibo, I think that's how you say it, where the satellites, I don't know if you know this movie, do you remember the Pierce Brosnan James Bond? When they were fighting on the huge radio satellites? We were there, Moo. We were there. We were like an hour away from this. We were about an hour away. Because we just got out of that cave that, remember, you thought there were bats in it. You remember the cave we went into?
There was bats.
Okay.
There were bats.
Yeah. We get on the road, and I said, honey, sugar love, baby doll.
No, you weren't like that.
Can you just point us in the right direction? And you said, you didn't map it out. You just pulled the map up and looked at it and said, yeah.
Because we're on an island, we probably didn't have very good service.
Let's head this direction. So we drive, a half hour? And then I say, hey, how close are we? And you go, oh, how I love hearing that sound when we're traveling. I know that we are not going where I thought we were when I hear, oh.
So I'm just saying, this was almost 9 years ago, and yet he still tells me to give him direction. So someone's not being intentional because he has not learned from his mistakes. It's like, if you want to go somewhere, hun, you should put it in there yourself because you already know. I can't.
I think the last time I asked when we were on a road trip, and then at that point I started just doing it. But you okay.
But I've told you a million times.
Yeah,
I'm like,
and you've legitimately tried to get better with your directions.
I have, but I've also been very honest with like, I don't know what I do wrong with this map, but it does not work for me.
Yeah, I'm like, why? We're just plotting directions. There's a blue line. It's telling us where to go. Why are we not going towards the blue line? So anyway, though, we get away from it, and I remember how I went into the furnace of adversity that day.
That was your own personal thing.
Yeah, but that day, honestly, I think back to that, and I remember how aggravated I got, and that showed me how impatient I was and how I wasn't extremely loving.
I obviously didn't care about seeing these satellites as much as you.
It was just neat because we were there. We were there. So we had to be intentional about where we actually want to go. And sometimes we hit adversity, but it's okay because it transforms us. It removes the obstacles in our lives that are keeping us from being that person. I go to set out to pray. Can't pray as long as I thought. Can't persist in prayer like I thought I could. Can't persist in the breakthrough like I thought I could. Now, this is an opportunity for the Holy Spirit to make the adjustments, to transform me so that I can persist in prayer and I can walk out and live that life of a disciple. Make those intentional moves. Make those actions to move in the right direction. And if I make the wrong ones, the Holy Spirit corrects me. The people around me, they correct me, they adjust me. We have to be intentional. So, who do you want to become? Are you willing to persist to get to it? And are you going to make the right actions, the right intentional moves to get there? Anything you want to add? All right. And with that, so we need our music. I need to have something I can click to hit some music to bring us down.
We need to move, just play us out on the sax over there.
Yes.
Sweet.
Yes.
Sweet bluesy rhythm.
Yes. And with that, that's the end of Pursuit Season 2, Episode 5. Being intentional. Go do what Jesus said. Intentionally.